Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. Tonight's going to be a very special night, and we couldn't be more thrilled and feel very blessed for everyone who showed up today. We have a lot of folks that came from the outer islands, and we really appreciate the effort that everyone has taken to come and join us tonight, so thank you. I would like to introduce my co-moderator tonight, Dylan Shropshire. He is COO and one of my partners at Big Island Grown Dispensaries. Dylan, please come up. So this is the first of hopefully many discussions to come. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting night. It's kind of uncharted in many ways. We have folks from all different aspects of the industry. And the one thing I do want to say is, in order to have a really good discussion, I think it has to be an honest discussion, but also very respectful. There's a lot of people that have very passionate views about the plant, about being patients, about being growers, and the participation in the industry here in Hawaii. And I just want to make sure that all of us are going into this with good intent, and that we're just respectful of one another's, background and experience and what we all have to say about this. So I hope when we leave here tonight, it's a chance for all of us to maybe hear another perspective, walk away with a new friend, and if nothing else, try to find some common themes that we can all stand behind as this takes shape here in the state. And so Pakalolo for the people. The concept behind it is really to find the common themes between all of us here in the industry, and also to have a successful block of folks that can vote and stand behind, pieces of legislation that we all feel is right for the state here, and really support the lawmakers that are willing to go to bat to bring this forward and to progress cannabis here in the state, provided that we can all kind of come together and have some common themes that we can offer meaningfully into some piece of legislation. So that's the intent tonight. So thank you so much for being here.
So thank you, everyone. We're all really, really passionate about the plant, and I think that's going to be really evident with everyone coming up here and talking about it tonight. We will have some live Q&A questions at the end. But when everyone's up here for the panelists, we have a few ground rules. First of all, just respect. Know that everyone up here is very, very passionate, believes in the plant, wants to see a future in Hawaii that makes sense for everyone. And we're going to keep our responses to 5 minutes or less, and we'll be calling on each panelist to answer each question. We'll start with a couple open-ended questions first, where we'll actually ask every panelist to give their answer, and then from there we'll go to direct panelist questions. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So we're after further, let's get the panelists up here, and then we'll introduce each one by name and give a little bio, and you'll also find a bio for each panelist in your book. So please welcome the panelists to the stage.
Okay, so first I would like to introduce Nurse May. Many of you might know her. She's very active at the legislature. She's been advocating and pushing for basic patient rights and really expanding the list of qualifying conditions. She's really there year after year, mobilizing, educating. She's personally certified over 8,000 patients here in the state, and she combines her passion for the plant with over 20 years of nursing experience, and it's really amazing to have you on stage, so thank you for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Monica Delgado. So Monica has been an advocate, a patient, and a grower for over 20 years. She has vast experience in managing cultivation facilities in both Nevada and Puerto Rico. She's been very active in the Nevada NORML organization and now is founder and secretary of the Hawaii chapter of NORML. Thank you very much for being here, Monica. Casey Rothstein. Casey is a grower for over 25 years. He's been a home grower, an advocate, and now has successfully transitioned over to founder and COO of the Kauai dispensary, Green Aloha. Thank you so much, Casey, for being here.
I'd like to introduce Keali'i Bertelmann on the left, and Keali'i is the CEO of Pakalolo Farmers. He's the exclusive sales rep for Aloha Organics organization, and in the past he was the lead grower for Malama the Roots. Keali'i offers over a decade of growing experience, both here in Hawaii and also in California. He has a long history of growing the plant using organic methods and natural methods, and he is a born and raised native Hawaiian, and we're lucky to have Keali'i here as he gives us unique insights into bridging the gap between Hawaiian culture and Hawaii, the cannabis industry here in Hawaii. Thank you, Keali'i. Second, I'd like to introduce Frank Mancinelli, and Frank is a 20-plus year veteran of the cannabis industry, from starting out in a collective in Seattle to becoming the director of cultivation in a large MSO or multi-state operator in New York. Frank offers a very unique perspective on what's happening in different states across the country. He brings his passion and expertise to the cannabis industry here in Hawaii by the launching of CannaOps Consulting based on Maui. So thank you, Frank, for being here. Roger Christie. Roger Christie is a longtime cannabis advocate, activist, and minister. He has founded and organized many groups, including the Hawaii Cannabis THC Ministry, the Marijuana Political Action Committee, the Hawaii Hemp Council, and Solution 120. Roger's passion for the plant resulted, unfortunately, in serving time in federal prison. And for nearly 40 years, Roger has been one of the pioneers of the cannabis movement here on Big Island, and we're very stoked to have Roger here on stage, as he is one of the true OGs of the cannabis industry here in Hawaii. Thank you, Roger, for being here.
Okay. So with that, if you would like, since we're sitting far enough apart, if you'd like to remove your mask, it's totally up to you. If you'd like to keep it on, whatever feels good. But we're going to lead off, and this is going to be an open panel question. And the first question is, what are the most important considerations as we develop the future of cannabis here in Hawaii? What do you think are some of the most important considerations that is important for lawmakers and other folks to really know? Roger, would you like to lead off with that, sir?
Sure, my pleasure. Aloha, everyone. Nice to be on the panel with you guys. Look forward to meeting you further after the show. One of the most important considerations for me is prevention, cannabis for prevention. We're operating under the medical marijuana model right now, medical cannabis model, and that doesn't allow for preventative medicine and for the food value to really nourish people, so they need medical cannabis less. So that's one of the big points.
Thank you so much. May, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think that one of the most important things as we develop the industry here is really having inclusivity and social justice when it comes to building an equitable industry. So not just in theory or in policy, but also in funding. We've seen some really great policy move forward in other states. Illinois, I think, is really one that a lot of people are looking at right now. So I think having equity and funding it.
Monica, what are your thoughts?
So I believe that this is one of the big first steps that we need to continue doing, is including people of all the industry, because it's really big. It's not just about growing or selling it. I mean, there's so many other things to cannabis that we as a community can continue putting more things out there for people that are curious or anything. There's just so many facets that can be looked into. So, and I think a lot of people just worry about that, growing it and selling it. And so maybe we just need to remove that from people's minds, that it's not just about that. It's a lot about other things.
Excellent. Casey, what are your thoughts on this question? Important considerations as we're moving forward and shaping this.
I mean, there's so many considerations to move forward with this industry, to try to shape it in a way that it's successful into the future. Hawaii's economy needs help, and this industry can provide a lot of jobs. It can lead to the kind of agriculture that could finally replace sugarcane. This is medical here right now, but it's adult use here right now. It's just not legislated as adult use right now, but adult use is certainly here. Adult use is coming nationally. There will be a national market. Eventually, there will probably even be an international market. And Hawaii has a rare climate where we can grow really better and more productive than almost anywhere on Earth. And it could be an enormous industry for the future here. We could be shipping Hawaiian sun-grown cannabis all over the world. We could bring millions and millions and even billions of dollars into the state. I'd like to see that go in a lot of directions. I'd like to see attainable licenses. I'd like to see us build a real craft industry here. I think there's a lot of potential, but if it doesn't roll out right, it could fall on its face and lead to a lot of failures.
Great points. Frank, I know you have a lot of experience. You've seen a lot of the markets maturing from the West Coast over to the East Coast. What are your thoughts on this? What should Hawaii be looking at as some of these more important considerations as we look to shape this?
Well, I think what is really the part that disturbed me the most in those markets that I've seen is that it quickly really went to big money and profits, and nobody really taking the time to figure out, are they actually growing the product well? And it really hampered the ability of any small-time legacy type farmer or distributor to get into the market. So it very quickly goes to big money to even have a foot in the door. And so it's basically monopolized by the big guys. And I really think that it's absolutely crucial, if you want a true, vibrant industry, that the legacy farmers, the smaller tier people, have a true shot of being successful, the craft industry, et cetera. So I think that the legislation, and I think it's very important that we do shape a political bloc is shaped, and you have leaders in office that are actually willing to do what is right and not what's easy, before you, hopefully as much as possible before you actually launch, because you can, and seen in a lot of states where they launch and then best intentions, but quickly it's the big giant MSOs that are controlling everything. Nobody else has a chance. Mentioned Illinois. There are some good things about Illinois, but one of the issues, I was working for a big MSO when Illinois went legal, and Illinois had a provision that the little independent stores could, the big guys had to sell to them too, but all the CEOs were, and until they would complain, until the board looked at them, they would still cut their deals. The big 3 or 4 in the state would cut all their deals and only give out what they had to. So it really needs to provide for the smaller distributors, and the smaller farmers have to have a real legitimate chance to be successful, or else it's going to fall that way again, probably.
Great insight. Thank you so much, Frank. Keali'i, what are your thoughts on this, with your background?
I guess I would just add on to what Frank just said, with curating more conversations like these, getting all the industry people involved, from growers to business owners to edible makers, and just having these types of conversations so we can kind of get to the bottom of it and figure out the best way to approach this.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I think we'll do another open panel question. And the next question we wanted to ask everyone here, kind of piggybacking off that last one, is what do you think the next best steps are for the industry here in Hawaii to take as we kind of evolve the cannabis industry here in Hawaii? Roger, do you want to start again?
Sure. Yeah, we created a website, solution120.com. And I hope people take a look at it. The idea is that within 120 days, we, the people of Hawaii, can have a world-famous multi-million-dollar cannabis harvest. That's like a certainty. You know, Colorado just passed, I think, $10 billion in sales. They've got frozen ground. I'm a Colorado native, by the way. They've got frozen ground half the year. And they're just shooting by us like Halley's Comet. And it's painful to watch in a way. I mean, I'm happy for them and sad for us. So I think in 2008, we created the Peaceful Sky Law. It's an ordinance, 08-181. The people of the Big Island passed the lowest law enforcement priority of cannabis ordinance. And that was for 24 plants in everybody's property. So everybody's backyard could be a health and wealth generator. And to me, that's the greatest way to go, is from the ground up. I got here in 1986 when things were really rocking. It was a very happy place, very different than it is today. Very little crime, almost no meth. People even left their keys in their cars and their houses unlocked a lot back then. And it was really sweet living, and there was backyard cannabis, and people were very happy with it. So from the ground up, I hope that answers the question there.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you. May?
So I think first we have to move out of the vertical model. I think it was a really good model to start because it definitely helped to get all of the kinks out and really diversify our industry through, providing opportunities for things like not just growing and selling, but delivery, lounges, extraction, edibles, but really creating pathways to license other types of businesses to really start to diversify our industry.
Excellent.
Thank you. Monica?
So kind of like I said before, this is a very good step in the right direction, making sure that there is a lot of people included in conversation before big moves are made. I think even taking the laws that we currently have on cannabis and kind of break it down and see where are the hot spots and where can we help and where can we push things to better everyone. Because like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of different, I've seen in Nevada just alone, I've seen people get rich with just doing the fingerprinting that you have to do for your agent cards that we have to get over there. I mean, there's just so much potential out there, and really the opportunity is there for everyone, but we get too caught up in the feelings, the passion that we have on the plant, and sometimes that just blinds us. So I think having more events like this where people are included and can come to the table and say, well, this is my experience, and then really getting down into the law and breaking it a little bit further so that it can be understood by many more people, then I think that's what we need to do here. Because I think, like everybody here has said, we have the potential to really make a difference in the cannabis industry here. And that's one of the reasons why we started what we did here, because we know that the land, the people, the culture, just everything that we have seen here can be beyond. And hopefully we become the model for the international level.
Agreed, 100%. Casey?
Well, I think the first step really is to not try to reinvent the wheel and try not to make the same mistakes that other states made. To look at the states that have rolled out cannabis industries, look at what worked and what didn't. For example, Nevada, open to recreational adult use, and it's a tourist-based economy, much like here. And they allowed tourists, obviously, to come in and buy, but you can't smoke in a casino, you can't smoke in your hotel room, you can't smoke on the street. They provided no place for people to smoke. So eventually they started to figure out that that was a problem. You know, we need to understand that that's going to be a need for consumption lounges from day one, because we are also a tourist industry based economy out here. So that's just one example, but I think we need to look at other states, see what's working, see what's not, and just try to do it right. And the main step we need to do is start stepping, because we're falling behind. You know, from the time it takes to get a law passed, to licenses issued, to those licenses built out, stood up, and being productive can be years, 2-3 years at least. And the rest of the country is moving forward like a freight train in this industry, and we're going to get left behind if we don't move. You know, there's going to be Hawaii brands, national brands, coming out of not Hawaii. You're going to see people from Hawaii doing Hawaii national brands out of California and Nevada and Oregon and everywhere but here, if we don't start moving forward and we get left behind. But the Hawaii brands should come from Hawaii. And at this point, we're falling behind. So, you know, we need to start studying and we need to start stepping and start moving this forward.
Excellent. So Frank, you know, you're here now, you've seen what's happened in these other states, knowing where we are in the evolution in the industry and you know, where we're going. What are your thoughts on the next steps based on what you've seen? And the common theme here, I think already we're finding one of the common themes, which is, you know, this attainable licensing for craft legacy farmers. I think that's something so far that I hear echoed by many, you know, multiple panelists so far. And I think, you know, what do you think about how that gets rolled out and what those next steps would be?
Well, definitely agree with everything I've heard. The conversation, you know, getting as many voices heard as possible is crucial. Everything that's already been done in all the other states, there are some lessons to be learned there for sure. Some of the needs, I think, for a successful market is definitely going to be not just the lowering of the barrier for a grower to get in, which means they have to allow outdoor growing. I mean, you live in Hawaii, and the fact that you have to have such a build out of infrastructure to create this plant in this state is, you know, not very beneficial. If you really want to be able to, you know, get to those things, there's some of those changes like that, the you know, allowing outdoors and greenhouses, but also the like May said, get rid of the vertical integration. That is just sets up monopolies and stifles anybody else having a chance. A California model I really respect. They looked at a lot of similar industries and they created all these different tiers and types of licenses, distributorships, not just production, retail stores. You could, you know, the middleman that creates the products, you know, they have a whole host of different types of licenses. Unfortunately, it still takes millions of dollars to get into any of them. But that kind of detail, because you got to try to quickly demystify cannabis. The price to pay for legalization in the beginning, we all knew, was high taxes, high regulation, but it's getting to the point where, come on, we all know you don't do this for a brewery or a winery or a distillery or, I mean, it's time to quit thinking that we have to treat this like we're creating, you know, pharmaceutical grade, you know, heroin. We're not, and so much burden in that regulation and the security and all the requirements and the fingerprinting, all that is a huge burden, and until they can actually start looking at this logically, which would be building a true political coalition that actually was willing to say, okay, yeah, that's silly, we're willing to look at a true model, I think. So building that power base in the legislature of people that are willing to actually look at true solutions. Let's really build here. Let's not just knee-jerk like everybody else is doing, fences, cameras, security guards, you know, armed transport or not armed. I mean, so those types of things, I think the quicker you can get to where you're actually looking at it just like any other industry and treating it just like any other industry, the quicker chance you have of getting to a real vibrant and successful industry.
Yeah, Kaylee, I know you were in California there for a bit, especially when it was starting to go legal, right? and you kind of saw how that rolled out. And then I know you came back home, and I know you've bounced between California and Hawaii and probably seen goods and, you know, pros and cons to both states, and how they both have kind of evolved. But what do you think, you know, here in Hawaii, what do you think is a good, like, kind of next step to kind of push this forward?
I think the next step to push this forward would be to connect the people with the plant, provide education about cannabis, and educating everybody about the industry here in Hawaii. You know, we have highly marketable climate. We can ship out to everywhere in the nation if it goes right, you know. So we have a huge potential. So just educating everybody on it, connecting our people back with the plant and back with the land. So, you know, maybe we can get a little bit more passion involved and love each other more.
I love that.
Love that too. Thank
Jaclyn?
you so much. So Casey, from, you know, your experience, I'll start off with you. Your experience as a home grower for so many years, as a patient, and then transitioning over into, you know, dispensary within, you know, having to function and play in the sandbox with all of this heavy regulation in the framework. What are some of the lessons learned, and what can you kind of, you know, highlight for those that, you know, are wanting to participate in the regulatory framework here? What does that compliance pathway look like, and what did it look like for you?
Well, I did a small home grow for just me and a caretaker, so, or someone who I took care of. So I wasn't doing it on any sort of large scale, but you know, I knew there was going to be regulations when we got into this and applied for the license and won the license and all. But I don't think any of us knew how regulated it would be. You know, with legalization is always going to come regulation. It's just how things work in America and pretty much everywhere. So yeah, I was a little overwhelmed by the level of regulation. It took an enormous amount of time, effort, and money to get going. You know, county building regulations are unbelievably burdensome. You know, trying to get through permitting took a year plus. You know, it was just way more than I ever thought it would be. That was the biggest lesson. That it is trying to run a cannabis business in a highly regulated environment, with the restrictions on banking, with the insanely, in fact, I wouldn't even say insanely, I'd say just ridiculously high taxes that we have here in the industry. We can't write off expenses. We're not treated like any other business in America when it comes to being taxed. So it's just, it was a lot more of a burden than I thought it would be. It was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. It was a lot more expensive, a lot further from profitability than I thought it would be. You know, it's this industry is it's hard to do on scale. It's hard to do clean. It's hard to get through the testing. Hawaii has truly the strictest testing environment and the most expensive testing environment in the country, and it's been a challenge. You know, we're going, and we're going to keep going, and we look forward to the industry expanding and maturing. But it has been a challenge, that I can say.
Excellent, thank you.
Question for you, Kaylee. You know, what can dispensaries or organizations like the HCIA, the Dispensary Association, and Pakalolo for the People, and NORML, and other organizations like this, what can they do for, you know, entrepreneurs like yourself that have started cannabis companies here in Hawaii? Is there anything that we can do or other organizations can do for you now that we're not?
guess there's a lot, so I'm kind of bombarded with trying to figure out which.
Take your time.
Getting back to having these conversations, you know, having everybody on the same platform to speak. I think for myself, I get a little intimidated being just a grower, having on this panel, you know. So having the ability to have these conversations with growers and business entrepreneurs and providing insight on the business and what's really going on, you know. Because most people don't really understand everything, you know. You can be a grower, you understand growing. You can be a businessman, you only understand the business part of it. But if you got to try to link those two together, because you have passionate farmers and you have passionate business people, and then they sometimes don't see eye to eye. So just being able to have the conversation or the platform to have those conversations where it's a equal playing field, I guess.
Yeah, totally agree.
That's an excellent question. So it's interesting because, you know, one of the things here, having passed the, you know, through the legislative process, to have, you know, medical cannabis be, you know, legal here, and then to have 15 years, you know, before you actually had some infrastructure for patients to tap into. I think it's safe to say that we have very sophisticated home medicine makers. We have folks that have been doing this for a really long time and have become really self-reliant with their own treatment, and relying on folks that they trust to help them do that. So, you know, I think it's really important that when I'm listening to you, Keali'i, and what you guys are saying about, you know, craft farmers and having these people be able to enter into this framework, you know, as we know it, it's not going to be the skills to grow. It's not going to be the skills to make the medicine. I mean, those are skills that people have, right? I think it's the pathway to compliance. So hopefully with that theme in mind, now that we have some kind of common ground, we could start thinking about, you know, how that takes shape. You know, Frank, between your input that you have and Casey, what you know about functioning now in this space, and May, you know, what patients really need and the testing behind it. Coming, Monica, from, you know, an organization that's really been advocating for patient rights to the plant for so long, there's lessons to be learned there. And then, of course, Roger, I mean, what your story and what you can contribute to this discussion is just so deep, and it's just pretty tremendous. So I think one of the common grounds is focusing on a pathway to compliance for folks that want to participate in the legal framework, right? And what that could look like. So I guess my question to you, Frank, is what is the best state's dual use program that you think would be a good model for Hawaii, even if it's not, you know, a cut and paste where maybe there's some level of customizing it for this unique place? What do you think is a good state for us to look to?
Well, in my experience in the states that went rec after they were medical, I really found, like, for instance, in Washington, where I had my business, that the only really thing they needed to do was just, and what Washington did was just give them, they didn't have to pay any tax on their product, but the medicine really is pretty much the same. You know, the different strains for different things, for sure, different extractions maybe for certain things for a certain routine, but overall, I think that, you know, giving the patient, you know, better access to it so they don't have to pay crazy taxes, so letting them, you know, go into a retail store. If somebody did want to set up, I know Washington was trying to set it up that they could have special, you know, medical certifications at certain dispensaries so they could do some things, but I found in all of them, even in Illinois, they just basically gave them a tax break. In Massachusetts, they just gave them a tax break, and every time I've seen them trying to do something a little more sophisticated, it just really became kind of unnecessary, because it really is just the same medicine, just packaged different, maybe, you know, targeting a specific thing. So I really think that, you know, allowing somebody that does a special RSO cancer treatment to to be able to do that without the high burden of having to have a state licensed retail store. I haven't seen a perfect one yet. The only thing I've seen any state try to do is just, give them a break at the register where, it's cheaper, tax breaks. And some states do allow the caregivers, some states don't allow, so that they could grow their own. I do think that Florida was an example of a medical. They're not a rec yet, but they did a pretty good job of allowing the caregivers to still really thrive and do individual things for true patients and stuff. So, I think there are definitely some pieces. I don't know that I know well enough to really dictate which one is best, but I think those things were, in my experience, seem to be the best way. I haven't seen anything else that maybe is really, besides caregivers and a break at the register and specialty treatments having a chance to do it without having to clear the high admission barrier into the industry.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Casey?
Just comment that I'm pretty sure Washington State did allow some products that are different for medical patients and certain dispensaries to be able to have a section that carries them in addition to not having to tax us. There's usually products that you can get higher potency levels for medical patient products and things like that for patients that need higher potency. So they did tailor it a little bit where they allowed different products for the medical, and I'm not sure if they have different testing requirements for the medical. I don't think so.
What that mainly was because when it was just rec before they tied into medical, you weren't allowed to make any health claims, medical claims at all, and they did allow growers to go through a certification process where they can say, I've grown this for medical purposes, and then allow retail stores to get a certification so that then they could say these have medicinal benefits. So it was, the products were the same, really. They just went through the grower or the extractor, and then the retail store went through a certification process so that somebody then was qualified to say, here's, medical benefits of this product. So that's what that mostly was.
In Hawaii, we have, a little bit different circumstance than some of these other states, just based upon that we're an island state, and we have, oceans in between the islands, and we have different counties, and it works a little bit differently than, Nevada, for instance. And I'm wondering, given some of these unique obstacles that we have here in Hawaii, is there any others that we should take into consideration as we kind of move an adult use program forward? And I think I'll ask May this question. Do you have any other obstacles that you think that we should be aware of as we kind of move forward?
So I'm not a fan of dual use. I think we should move straight to adult use, and but with provisions for growing rights. I think just kind of a blanket like California where everyone can have 6 plants, just have like a plant count number for just regular people. And sorry, I got distracted. What was the question again?
Oh, just we have these. I just is there certain things that we should be considering as we kind of move to an adult use? Like if we don't go dual and we go adult, what should we be, given the unique characteristics of Hawaii, what should we be considering, or what should we be paying attention to as we write or push for this new legislation?
Yeah, so I think that there's certain states that have done, that have like pieces that have really good pieces. One thing I really liked about Missouri is they awarded licenses per population, and I think that that's one thing that we've seen, especially in Oahu. We only have really dispensaries concentrated in one area, so we have entire, like the entire west side, the entire North Shore has nowhere, to get cannabis. So I think, having variety and really having multiple levels of licensing not just growers, not just retail, but so that way normal people can get into it too. Yeah. If they want to do delivery, if they want to do extractions, if they want to do edibles, there's space for everyone. And maybe having some form of a incubator, like Hood Incubator in Oakland. It's a really super cool program. There's some just really amazing people doing good stuff. So I think just taking what they're doing and tailoring it to us.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the geography and the patients population between, like for instance, Big Island. We have obviously a big island, and it's difficult to reach these different patient bases. We really wanted to see delivery. I think that would have really solved a lot of the problem, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to open up a dispensary if the population is Nahalehu. It might not make sense. So that's a good point. But I'm curious why you think why not dual use. I'm curious to hear your perspective on why just go to straight. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that.
So I think looking at it from a medicinal lens, some of the issue with adult use is that it's not necessarily as regulated with testing, but we could, since we have really, we have to change our testing, but we could get it to where everything has been tested, and I think for me, it really comes down to a social justice issue. When we look at states that have legal versus decriminalization versus no cannabis laws, the people that are incarcerated, the people that are arrested, it's virtually zero compared to, even us. Hawaii, even though we have decriminalization, even though we have a medical program, people are still getting in trouble for cannabis. If you go and spend a day in court, you're gonna see a cannabis case. And so for me, that's like my main motivation for adult use, and just to provide access. Just having access for people is huge,
That makes sense.
That was a very good response. Totally agree.
I think the next...
Roger wanted to add to that.
Please.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that comes up is the best thing I think we could do for we the people of Hawaii is to have state initiative, the right for we the people to vote on whatever the heck we want. If we had that, then we could fill in the blanks with whatever our dream is. And if we need to, change it the next year, then we would have the right to do that. It's outrageous. It's mind-blowing to me that Hawaii does not have the right to state initiative. We the people don't have the right to change the law. We have to, go through legislators who are influenced by lobbyists who probably have more money than we have in influence. And anyway, that is kind of a generic answer to solving maybe some of the issues and challenges that we're talking about here today. So you were asking, really, what could you do as a business to help promote maybe just the state initiative concept, so we could come up with great ideas and move this state forward, because we're stuck now.
It's a great point. Totally agree. It's pretty crazy that we don't have that here in Hawaii. If you look at the most progressive cannabis states, how are they moving their programs forward? State initiatives, right? By the people, from the people. So
I think this is actually a great opportunity to follow up and ask Roger, what does cannabis freedom feel like?
I had a level of cannabis freedom when I was ordained as a cannabis sacrament minister in the year 2000, and then I immediately applied to the state for a license to marry people. And on the application, it was a service of the Department of Health, and it still is. It was free. I happened to qualify for getting a license. And at the line of questioning where it said, "What's your denomination or sect?" I put Cannabis Sacrament and let it fly and see if it would go through the process. I got a call a couple days later from a woman at the Department of Health. She said, "Mr. Christie, we have a problem with your application." And I'm thinking, I'll bet you do. Whatever is your problem? And she said, you forgot to put your title in here. And I said, I'm not really into titles that much. Maybe something will come to me, at some point in time. But is there anything else? And she goes, no, the First Amendment's a beautiful thing. Have a nice career. And so I was uniquely licensed by the state of Hawaii. Now, ultimate freedom is when you don't have to ask. I mean, actually, I didn't have as much freedom as I crave, and I think we all deserve. If you have to ask for freedom, then you don't have freedom, really. But for almost 10 happy years, I ran the Hawaii Cannabis THC ministry, and our goal every day was to say yes to as many people as possible coming in the door. And they had all kinds of issues more than just cannabis. The dog died, mom's in the hospital, brother has cancer, whatever, all that stuff. And our goal was to see that people leaving, I told our secretaries and our doorman every day, our goal was that we said yes to as many people as possible, and the people left there smiling. And so we were able to say yes to people for trays of clones, for seeds, for Aloha bags, which are free bags of shake. And it wasn't, I couldn't mail herb legally around the country, but DEA agent in town, U.S. attorney Ed Kubo, Vice Squad, everybody told me that we had the freedom to do a private cannabis ministry in Hilo, and it was a glorious thing. It was pinnacle. I think it went to my head a little bit. I got a little cocky about it. And I got to say, pride went before my fall. I can't just blame the cops for kicking my butt and the other people that got arrested. But it was a beautiful thing, and I hope everybody can experience it. I tried to be out of commerce. I'm not so much a business guy. Maybe much to the disappointment of some of my family members. Sorry, Mom, didn't make $1 million. But had a lot of fun, said yes to a lot of people, and made Hilo a very happy place for 10 happy years. So, yeah, that was as close to cannabis freedom as I can imagine. I like the concept of separation of church and state, because we did not have to ask the state for permission, other than once the license was granted. Then there were no rules, there were no regs. Nobody came in the door to count the plants or, qualify my scale or anything like that. So it felt great. It felt great. I hope everybody can have that level of freedom or more going forward.
Yeah, normalize plant medicine. Free the plant. Everyone should be allowed to grow a plant, right? I mean, that's how I feel. I know a lot of people in here feel the same way. Monica, you were talking about some of the, unique strengths, and that's really what I wanted to ask you about. Hawaii's in a unique position. We're known already throughout the world for growing really good cannabis, thanks to people on this stage and in the audience. What unique strengths does Hawaii have that we should really double down on as we start to get an adult use or look for adult use? What strengths should we really focus on?
Number one, I think that it being still a substance one drug is one of our biggest hurdles. That could make a difference where someone can walk into their doctor's office and feel free to ask their doctor for a prescription for cannabis. Why can't it be an option? That can bring the education to the table a lot quicker, and it can bring it to a lot more voices. I think that would also help policy and lawmaking. A lot of good things here too is the land. We've got agriculture land here like crazy, Big Island, and we should be able to utilize it. That's number one. Really bringing programs into anybody any business really, to sustainability, reducing the plastic. We have all kinds of really good things that we can bring to the table because we are such a beautiful island that still has deep roots where we can make a difference. But we still have to bring the people to the table to bring that, that conversation up. There's a lot of things that we can bring up. But policymaking, I think that, again, if you can be honest and open with anybody, it's still really taboo. I feel like people still feel like, oh my God, you're a pothead, or, all these labels. And it's like, people just need to know that it is medicine. The dual thing is kind of back and forth. To me, cannabis is medicine. So what's the difference? Do you either want it or you don't, and you move on to whatever you want. That's just how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Excellent. So Frank, I have a question for you. You talked about MSOs, and during the evolution of a state program, that you've seen some MSOs come in. What would it need to look like, I guess, in order to keep it, a craft, local economy, in your opinion? What would the licensing need to look like? What insight do you have on that specifically?
I think it would need to look very similar to some similar industries, like a craft beer industry. If you have an idea and you can get enough funds together, not an exorbitant amount, and you can get your brewery up and running, same thing should be for a farmer or a product maker. And then by the same token, there's so many places for them to sell their beer. You should be able to buy cannabis anywhere you can buy beer and alcohol, and boot alcohol and tobacco. And it's just all the burdens of having a retail store or a dispensary or a production facility that are 10 times the regulatory burden of the other similar. I think it needs to get to that as quickly as possible. And then I remember early on in Washington, right after we passed, everybody just felt this incredible need to rush in and hurry, get in. If you get in the door, you got to get in now, you're missing, or else forget it, it's too late. And I just would laugh at them. And I was like, today you can start a brewery or distillery or winery and become insanely successful 70 years after alcohol prohibition ended. So it's still going to be the same thing. You have a good idea, a good execution, build a good product, build a loyal customer base, you're going to be successful, even if, there's already 20 or 30 other ones out there doing it. So I think it just as quickly as you can get to looking similar to those industries is the quicker you'll get to having a truly vibrant and equal industry around here.
Awesome. Kaylee, got a question for you. You've been back home for a little while, and you've gone into some of the dispensaries, and tried some of the product and kind of experienced what dispensaries are doing here. And my question for you is, what can dispensaries do better, and how do we as a state correct that and make that happen when adult use is enacted?
You can pay your growers more. Yeah, just have a better relationship with your growers, because they're the heart and soul of your guys' product. So if you have a passionate farmer or cultivator, then it's going to be presented on that plate just like a chef, right? So if they're stoked and happy to be there, the product is going to be outstanding as well. Can you reiterate that question so I can?
Just like, what do you think dispensaries can do better, and just how can we make those changes happen, or how can we correct those issues potentially as adult use is kind of enacted?
Maybe have more community events, outreach to the community, and see what their desires are for the plant and medicine that they're receiving. Get insight from your customers or your patients. Just running a passionate team is key, I feel, for all the dispensaries. I've been to not all of them. I choose to partake of my own medicine, but there are good dispensaries out there doing good things. The Island Grown is one of them.
Yes.
Zinquai is another one of them. I usually don't talk too highly about the dispensaries because there is a lot of misunderstandings. But yeah, just outreaching, communicating with your communities and seeing maybe what their wants and desires are for the plant and the medicine that is being provided. Yeah.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I actually have a follow-up question for you, Keali'i. You know, if there are lawmakers in the audience right now, what do you think is some of the most important things that you'd like them to walk away with and be thoughtful about as they're looking to shape legislation here in the future, to be inclusive, but also to hit the mark and make sure that it's authentic for here? What are your thoughts, and what would you like them to know?
Maybe don't be afraid to ask questions to growers, dispensary owners, everybody that's in the industry, so they can get some insight on it. You know, I think that's what is lacking. You know, they don't have the correct understanding of this medicine, pretty much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to say law enforcement has been more than wrong about cannabis for 80 years, and they need to be held accountable for that. They have lost their credibility. They have power, but they do not have credibility as far as I'm concerned. You know, any fifth grader hitting Google can find out and reiterate honest information about cannabis. And for some reason, police administration, not individual officers, but the higher-ups have just been more than wrong, and that's being kind to them. They've just held back and created crime, created suffering that's unnecessary. And, you know, we just, I don't know. I don't like to let them get away with it. Sorry, got to be called out. Got to be called out. We deserve better. And it's up to we the people. It's up to me. I play what I call the responsibility game, that I'm responsible. And we the people are responsible. I think we get the government we deserve, which is pretty sad. I think we deserve a lot better. And it's up to us to be better about it. But law enforcement, we can't let them get away with being more than wrong about cannabis. We got to call them on it. And I think they appreciate it if it's done with good manners and respect.
I agree with that. Thank you, Roger. May I have a question for you? So you spoke about making sure that, you know, what we're shaping here is inclusive, you know, and the social equity component of it. What are some key highlights that you think need to be incorporated into, you know, this social equity component that really serves the people of Hawaii true to form? What do you think?
So I think funding it really. You know, I think that all good programs need funding, and there's so many really brilliant growers, product makers, entrepreneurs here, and because of, you know, cannabis with banking, and, you know, we can't go out and get loans, seeing some of these micro projects funded throughout the United States. So I think that whatever policy we write, it has to have a piece for funding, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you.
You know, Roger, you were talking about, you know, the police and all those things, and we've seen in the you know, throughout the country now they're starting to overturn past convictions and things like that. What can we? I mean, obviously, we should be telling the police they're doing it wrong, and we should try and correct it and make it to where there isn't any penalty for cannabis, really, if it's done within a normal set of laws. But what do you think we should do in terms of the prior convictions and what's happened in the last 40 years or so here? What can the state do, or what should the state do?
amnesty or forgiveness. There's a spiritual principle that also deserves a legal component, and clemency, cleaning people's records, possibly returning, some confiscated goods or farms. I mean, I was here back in the day when it was very common to confiscate somebody's farm, and even without a conviction. Do you know that? Even without a conviction. The Big Island is the worst track record in the state for confiscating people's property even without a conviction. It's unbelievable. So it's about us, really. It's our government. If we take more of an ownership, which you guys are doing, I thank you so much for your sincerity, your integrity, for hosting this, for everybody on the panel, for being here, and people in the audience. Thanks for participating and spreading the good word. If we increase our mana, then I think we will decrease the victimization that we've been suffering. And this is our one chance on planet Earth to, yeehaw and have a great ride, have a great life, speak our truth, live it, be bold, step out of our comfort level a little more. And I think then, it's the word demand comes up. You can request or you can demand that we have justice, and that justice includes expunging people's records and maybe repairing their life financially to some degree. I mean, there's some families that their kids were taken away for cannabis. I used to get calls every once in a while. Mom tested positive at the hospital after delivering a baby, and they took the baby away. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Was that baby ever returned? I don't know, but I think, we need maybe a forensic audit where somebody professionally, independently takes a deep dive and sees, what kind of repair. The toll has been enormous. The harm it's so painful but thank you for bringing it up, because even the intention to repair it is part of the healing process. I would like to hear politicians say that, I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Yeah, that would be great.
It was just a couple years ago, the police departments got together and put out a brochure, I think it was about 5 years ago, and said marijuana is not medicine. That was just a couple years ago. Have you seen that? It was unbelievable. I mean, it was 15 years after it was legal for medicine. It's like, really? Wow, we let them get away with that? So it's incumbent upon us to be citizens doing citizens' work. We have a responsibility. And silence equals consent. It's a very important legal principle. And when a bully takes the stage or whatever, or, offers something at the legislature, and people keep quiet, it's understandable that motion should pass. So silence equals consent, and we have to be the squeaky wheel and stand up for what's right.
Thank you, Roger. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and highlight that, both Monica and May, they've been so active in educating people on, the legislative process, how to submit testimony, what to do and how to walk through that process. So thank you very much for those efforts. I think that there's a misconception that maybe it's more difficult than it actually is to have your voice heard legislatively and to be able to submit testimony. So thank you very much for doing that. Piggybacking off of what Roger is saying, I agree with you. Everyone needs to feel heard and making sure that we can collectively help to demystify that process for folks. So thank you. Monica, NORML, the organization has been really at this for years and years. What can we learn here in our quest to kind of free the plant? What can we learn from NORML, the organization and the work that they've done?
That it's not easy, and that it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of voices. I haven't had the opportunity to go to like the Capitol in Carson City. I wasn't able to attend, but it gets pretty big and it gets pretty loud, and sometimes it takes that. So that's, on our social media, we try to keep it balanced, try to hear everybody out. We don't, pick sides, anybody can come on there, and that's what we want. We want everybody's voice to come and speak your mind, because you never know, somebody that's doing some little farming on the side can have the brightest idea about legalization and what the next step can be. And it's been like that with NORML, as far as I can tell. It's just, ideas, people come and, you push hard for that one thing. So sometimes we just have to focus on one or two things and push it forward and put the brakes on other stuff and give those bigger items a chance to survive. So really it's just a lot of hard work, getting a lot of people together to do the testimony. I mean, even though we push, I think we see a lot of people, a lot of traffic coming through our stuff, and sometimes to just hear you get over 300 opposed testimonies, there's a lot more people on these islands than 300. So the voices have to be heard, and if we can't, I think everybody that's here, we can all make the effort to push people to bring that voice forward, and don't be afraid. There is opposition and there is good things, but if nobody speaks up about it respectfully and in a loving manner, the way the plant should be, move forward, I think that things are going to die on the table, and it's going to be other people making decisions for us.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to highlight, I think it's really important, is it's not necessarily black or white. I think that we spent time trying to educate folks on the fact that you can have opposition to certain parts maybe of a bill without needing to completely kill the bill, right? So it's about taking what's good and moving that forward, and really highlighting what it is that doesn't work or that maybe does. Because I think the more articulate and the more you can express about your point of view, I do believe that, these committees, these lawmakers, some of them are really reading this testimony ahead of time and really digesting it and being quite thoughtful. You can tell during these committee hearing meetings. But I do think it is about making sure that, it's either support or oppose, and that obviously holds weight. But I think being more expressive about what parts of it make sense and don't, I think that's really important for lawmakers to hear as well. So this is going to be an open panel question now, okay? And it's going to be one of the last open panel questions before we head over to some audience questions to kind of mix it up. But what does the ideal future for Hawaii cannabis look like to you? Now I know this might be a rehashing, but it's good to kind of solidify this and put this out there. What does your perfect world look like? Keali'i?
Hawaii taking that spot where we belong in branding and marketing and shipping it to the world, pretty much. That would be the ideal or perfect future for Hawaii, and having everybody in between, from dispensaries to your everyday small-time farmer being able to be a part of the industry. That would be a perfect future for Hawaii, I feel.
Excellent. Frank, what do you think?
Excuse me, I think just like I was saying before, an industry that's very similar and unburdened by the unnecessary burdens that cannabis is, just like, again, a distillery or a brewery, being able to have the experience or the passion to create a good product that people want to buy, and you can connect with your consumers or your medicine that you want to provide, and just be treated like just any other industry, so that the good ideas, the good products, the good companies survive, even small ones up to big ones. And I think just trying to finally just getting rid of that stigma and treating it like a normal industry, just like everything, all the other industries, without the extra burden. So if we can get there, then the small farmers can create their craft brands, the small independent distributor can have their little, weed store, just in a neighborhood or wherever, just, like any other store can pop up. And once it's treated like that, and the 280E tax laws and the banking laws are all regulated, so it can operate just like every other free market industry in the world can operate. I think that's, that's what the perfect market looks like to me.
Excellent.
Well, there's a lot to this one here. I think a few things, a legalization market needs regulations, but those regulations need to not be so burdensome that they hold back or that they hamstring the industry, essentially. Same thing with taxes. We know the state needs taxes. We know they're going to tax this item, and there's a fine line between taxing it to where you're raising money for the schools and things that we need, and overtaxing it to where you're keeping people away from it because it's too expensive. That's one of the big problems we've seen in some of the states as they went rec, because the taxes were so high that the cost stayed so high, and people didn't come into the legal market. They stayed in the shadows because it didn't make sense to try to do business in the legal market because it was so prohibitive. So I think that's a big thing to make sure we don't do. If we can get past that and set it up right, it'd be great to see, like I said earlier, attainable licenses, craft size licenses, a broad system where you have people who produce, who grow and produce the material, the raw material. You have processing, manufacturing guys that can make the oils. You can have different licenses for edibles, for topicals, for delivery. You could just really build a really strong industry in Hawaii to start that will build the future for a exporting industry that eventually will come. And like I said earlier, we've been looking for an industry to replace sugar here for a long time, and this could be it. This really could and should be it. But we need to keep moving it forward, or we're going to get left behind. We're going to be an industry that is chasing all the other states, and it's that's what I'm worried about. The future can be very bright, but I'm worried that it's not going to be. I'm worried that Hawaii is going to be too slow to move, and that we're going to all miss out on a real opportunity to build national brands.
I'll just start off with, again, descheduling and destigmatizing. I think that once that hurdle is removed, we can move forward. I would love to see even programs in schools where we're teaching our children about cannabis, just like they had the DARE program. They scared us away from drugs. They taught us that cannabis was bad. Now we need to reverse all of that has been taught year after year, and just everything is so frowned upon with cannabis that really, it hinders us. It keeps us at a level where we cannot express the love that we have for it. So we should look towards doing, again, the community events, speaking openly about it, making sure that, people that have a question, we can answer respectfully and with good knowledge and stuff like that. That's always important. I think that education is number one. So I would love to see more educational programs, more community events that have that opportunity where people can come and ask questions and not feel like they're going to be looked at in a different way.
Excellent.
So what everybody said here, but in just my ideal world, we would Hawaii would be a center for cannabis research. We have all of the infrastructure here to really be worldwide leaders, where we can lead cannabis research in not only ag, but also really in studying this medicine. We have, John A. Burns. There's been some really great cannabis research as far as drug development that's already been done at UH. So in my ideal world, we would not only become a commercial center for cannabis, but we would also really become a research center as well, and they could really grow well together.
I like that. Add that to mine.
Yeah.
That's really.
You know, the alcohol industry has been highly regulated, still is highly regulated. It was outrageously prohibited, which caused a lot of crime and violence and trauma. And the flip side of that is there are now home brew rules. And if you don't know them yet, I highly recommend people Google search Hawaii law for home brewing. It's hundreds of gallons of beer and wine can be manufactured at home. No tax, no permit, no permission, no regulation, no oversight, no nothing, no inspection. It's really quite free. Well, there's one thing that's literally cut in stone, one thing only, before you go in the doors to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that is equal justice under law. And I would love to see that we have equal justice under law for home growing like we have for home brewing. And we started in Hawaii from growing 1 to 24 plants is a misdemeanor, smallest segment of crime, and then 25 and above is known as commercial use and a felony. But I've always suggested we start out and solidify 24 plants in everybody's backyard that wants it, and equal justice under law. If somebody takes that case to the Supreme Court, I think they're going to win it because that's the only thing it says going in the doors. So that's my feeling. And then from that, the excitement would be outrageous. I mean, the governor did a press release tomorrow. Within 24 hours, the state would be like on fire with enthusiasm. Oh my God, I can grow herb. Where do I get the seeds? Where do I get the knowledge? How can I get a how-to book? Can I hire you as a consultant? Can I talk to you about my grandma needs medicine? I mean, it would just spark it off without creating burdensome industry rules that you guys, God only knows, have to put up with. So that's my thought. Ground up instead of top down.
Love that. Well, we were going to go to live Q&As, but I thought I'd give the panelists, in case one of you wanted to ask another panelist a question, kind of open. Does anyone on the panel want to ask another panelist a question before we go to the audience? Perfect.
I want to ask about seeded bud. When can seeded bud be purchased at the dispensary? What's holding it back? No, when I say that, people go, call security and get that guy out of here. Shut that guy up. But to me, that's the healthiest plant to make into a drink. The hemp seed is known as one of the best immune system builders that there is on planet Earth out of all the millions of plant products and things to eat. Cannabis hemp seed, fresh, fertile, organic. Not lobotomized, 0.3%, but let the plant grow and do its healthy thing. But to me, that would seeded bud.
Yeah, what do you think?
Where
about
is it,
that, Dylan?
They work on that.
I mean,
sure.
Yeah, because you wanted to promote seeds and clones.
Yes.
We did, yeah. No, we've been
still
pushing
trying
that
to push
for
it.
a while.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you're a patient grower right now, there's this plant limit, which it is what it is. But 10 plants, you start to phenotype a genetic. It's like, how are you going to phenotype a genetic with a limit of 10 plants when this is a plant, a little sprout? So I think seeds and clones would, if they keep the current regulations, the caregivers and patients, the limits, I think that would really help home growers because they could come in, get clean genetics, no powdery mildew. They know it. They know it's clean. They know it's good. It's tested. They don't have to phenotype it. It's going to be good right off the bat, and then they don't have to worry about their plant count. They can do 10 of those and be going. Yep. So we've been trying to fight for that, but for some reason they just keep gutting that out of there. Yeah. They don't like it. So they don't like people having plants. Roger.
Are you prohibited from selling seeded bud?
No, we are not. So that is an option. I got to talk it over with the BIG crew in here. But maybe we'll smoke one later and talk about that some more.
So before we go out to the audience, we had two lawmakers specifically that I know tried to make it tonight, and I want to acknowledge them. I'm not sure if they were able to be here, but part of the intent behind Pakalolo for the People is really supporting and acknowledging the lawmakers that are going to bat year after year. And so I do want to acknowledge Senator Joy Sam Buenaventura. She is an OG in her own respect. Every year she's going to bat for the industry here, for Big Island, and she's really leading so many of these discussions, fighting for basic patient rights, inter-island transport for patients, and she does this year in and year out. So I want to thank Joy. I don't know if you're here, but thank you so much, Senator, for everything that you're doing. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge a freshman lawmaker. She is just super energetic, beautifully articulate, passionate, very supportive. She introduced a legalization bill on the House side, on the House Health Committee, if you could believe it. But she put it through, and I want to acknowledge her. I think she's going to be a true ally in years to come, and she is fearless. Her name is Representative Janae Capella. So please give it up for Janae Capella. Okay, so now we're going to go to the audience.
Good evening. Thank you, panel, for being here. We really appreciate all your fine input. When we talk about future of Hawaii and what it should look like, Roger and I have been working on this since '89, I believe, talking with the university about hemp and transitioning our croplands from hemp, or from cane to hemp and things like that. I'm a legacy grower, 40 years here in Hawaii. I do have a pretty good idea of what we might try to do. And I'd propose that we put limitations on our land that we can initially grow. We have legacy growers lead that limited land. So say we get an acre, and you show you can do a good job with an acre, then you can go on and do more. This will do several things. It'll stop the big guys from coming in and trying to roll over us right away. It'll also boost our brand internationally, because we will have high quality coming out of here as opposed to bulk material that's not of great quality, but could be produced here. Furthermore, I really roll like Roger too. I was with his ministry in the past, and I really believe it should be like cucumbers and tomatoes. I should be able to buy clones, seeds, sprouts, whatever, at the farmer's market. I have been a food producer here in Hawaii as well. I had one of the largest tomato operations, organic, here in the state, shipped islands wide. This should be the same kind of thing. We should have an open marketplace. If I produce a fine quality product and somebody wants to buy it and they buy it, great. There should be no regulation in there whatsoever as far as I'm concerned. We can build regulations if we see actual need. But otherwise, we are complicating our situation. We are reducing our chance of success here in the future, since we already know we're so far behind it as far as the rest of the nation and the world is concerned. So I'm offering that we move ahead in a united fashion that says, okay, yeah, you got to have 5 or 10 years living here in Hawaii before you can get a permit. Permits are attainable, maybe $4,000 or less. And again, finite regulation, I mean nothing. Zero, just like you got a permit, great, go for it, guy. You can sell it all you can, great, good for you. You're not selling it? Well, that's your situation. I can grow a bunch of tomatoes, but can I sell them all? Maybe, if I got a good quality product. But if I don't, I can't sell them. Same thing. So this will whittle down those that can, those that can't. It'll also increase our efficacy, across the board. So that as our industry grows into an international world supplying industry, as Roger and I figured out years ago, it would take 50,000 acres just for us to start supplying the United States. 50,000 acres of high-grade cannabis. I think that's going to take us a while to work up to. But that's just the United States. So if we can have legacy growers lead this opportunity and have other growers learn, and we propagate these growers and then tie it in with rural economic development, actually producing food along with cannabis, not just tilling the earth and hurting her and laying plastic and drip tape and monoculture. No, this is not where we're going. We have to take Hawaii back from the cane days and put it into the future where individuals are actually husbanding the land again, like we did once upon a time in this land. It's important that we take this opportunity to make ourselves sustainable, not just on export products, but also products that we can use here locally to feed ourselves and also export if they complement us. So we need to think seriously how to come together on what these steps are. Meeting together today is fantastic. This is the hale halawai we need. We really need to come together as a group of people and say, legislators, this is what we want. Don't wait for them to tell us what they have for us. That's not what's happening. That's not how we get into the future. We get into the future by acting appropriately, by deciding together, this is a good program. Okay, let's run it. And again, if we start out with low abilities to look after people, make a permit cheap and say go. Don't give them all these taxes, all these regulations. Give them tax breaks. Give them money to get started. Let's secure farmers on their land so that they know they won't get kicked out after they pulled off a couple of good crops. Let's make it so that Hawaii is strong within itself, strong in its production of an export market, and strong within its production of sustainable food locally. Also subscribe to the Hawaii Farmers Union United. There's 120 people there that would love to get into this industry. Everybody's kind of waiting to see what's happening. How do we do this? It's not an easy way to go. But if we can come together, maybe we got a chance to really make a difference. And so again, I want to thank everybody here tonight. Appreciate the input.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Victor. I'm the Director of Cultivation for Big Island Grown. A few years ago, I found out I had cancer. That kind of changed my life, turned my whole world upside down. I was familiar with cannabis. I was part of a lot of really successful cannabis companies in the Bay Area. I grew up here on the Big Island. I went to Hilo High School. After graduating, I went to the Bay Area. Come from a long line of cannabis growers in my family. So I picked up the buck and started that. Found out I had cancer, came back to Hawaii, successfully treated my cancer with cannabis. I'm now cancer-free. And at the same time, Big Island Grown, the whole dispensary system was rolling around. I got a part of it, and now I've worked my way up where, I'm happy to call these guys family, and currently the Director of Cultivation, So I'd like to kind of bring two things up. So in my experience, and a lot of what is echoing of what you guys are saying, is the lack of education, especially coming from the people that are making the laws. I commonly deal with the DOH regularly. Me and the DOH inspector are good friends. I see him at least once a month. And it's evident that they don't know a lot. They put into these positions, and they don't really have the information or the experience to make change or even understand the changes that are needed. So how do we make sure that the people that are writing our laws are educated? It's just like super basic. How do we make sure that they are being consulted by experts like yourselves or other people in this audience? How are we sure that they even know what they're talking about? I feel like that's a huge issue that a lot of people kind of have skirted and don't really want to talk about, but I think we have the power to come together with all our backgrounds, all our experience, all our knowledge, and be that force that says, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. You have to come to us and talk to us before you move on with policy or you create these laws. Where's the checks and balances for their lack of knowledge towards an industry that they are regulating?
Thank you, Vic. That's a loaded question, and thank you for that beautiful statement, too. If you guys mind, can I jump in real quick? So one of the things that I think is fair to say is when, at least 5 years ago, when the dispensary system was established, the law was established, and they went out for applications and the whole licensing process, it was very clear that we were all kind of learning together. I think it's fair to say that there weren't, they're always experts, right? And in their own right, understanding how to grow or make medicine. But I think surrounding policy and regulation, I think it was one of these things where because we were one of the first states to pass through legislature the law, but it took so many years after. I think there was a sit back and almost wait and see what other states are doing first, pull away the good things, and kind of discard some of the things that didn't work. I can tell you now that the regulatory framework that we are functioning in as far as the dispensary systems, I'm a pharmacist. I've been practicing pharmacy for close to 20 years. The fact is that I dispensed hydrocodone, oxycodone, morphine, codeine, fentanyl patches, amphetamines, and dealt with a half a dozen regulatory agencies, and it doesn't come close to the gravity of regulation and compliance that we have to deal with 2 regulatory agencies, and that is the Department of Health and the Narcotics Enforcement Division. It's all what I can say is this: I have seen a progression from the beginning where, I could say for the Department of Health, where they are now really going to these conferences and are one of the founding members, I believe, I'm pretty sure they're a founding member of CANRA, which is a National Cannabis Regulators Association. And this is where you finally have dialogue and a network of regulators from all of these states that are coming together. So I know on a regular basis, the folks at the Department of Health are looking and, connecting with folks from New York and from Illinois and Washington and other states. And at least they have this resource now. So I think we all have a way to go, to be honest with you. I think the regulation is heavy. But I do think that I've seen a progression for what that's worth. And I think that, it must be very difficult for them too. And I just want to say that it's kind of a give and take. So I think we all have to have some compassion for the fact that, I'm new to this too, right? Relatively speaking. I work with folks that have been doing this, like yourself, Vic, for lots of years. And there's a learning curve. And I think that as long as the intent is there, I think we should give people the ability to just, go through that journey also. But I do agree that the regulation is heavy. I think we need to take some common sense approaches. And I do not think that this is nuclear waste, which is how we handle it here. And it's absolutely absurd that you can actually go an inner island with, opiates in your pocket to medicate for pain, but you can't take your medicine to another island if you're seeking care. It's completely absurd. Hope that answers your question. Okay.
I would just say to your question also, the answer is engage. Call your legislatures, write your legislatures, give testimony. They do often read that testimony. Events like this are a good start. We have legislature here tonight who's obviously here to learn about the industry. So I think engagement's a big thing. That being said, legislatures they're people too, and there are some people out there who are eager to learn, and there are other people who aren't. And you're going to find that some people think they know everything and don't want to be told new information, and other people are happy and open to learning new information. And vote for the ones that are happy to learn new information.
It's a great point, Casey, and I think it really speaks to the intent also of what we're trying to do here, which is support the lawmakers that are willing to go to bat for us, to highlight them and to really have a voting bloc that supports them. So, thank you. If anyone has a question, we actually have a mic in the middle there. If you'd like to line up and ask, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Aloha kako. My name is Randy Gantz. My question is specifically for Keali'i, but if other board members want to answer. And it's regarding to industry in general. The concept of the sugar industry, it came up a few times. And no one can dispute that it was a wildly successful industry, but I think the conversation around if it was a responsible industry comes up often. Sugar plantations have decimated lands across these islands, void them of nutrients, was very extractive, but again, wildly successful for Western standards. Kaylee, I really respect the fact Pakalolo farmers' ethos around natural products, organic, concepts of Aloha Aina, living with the things we have here. And that's uniquely a Hawaii thing in indigenous cultures around the world. How can we develop an industry that is responsible, that lives and breathes Aloha Aina, that allows that local flavor to come through. And when we do have a thriving industry here is one that's responsible. It's accommodating to indigenous cultures and making sure that we are putting back into the environment and not extracting like industries in the past have done.
You get all the easy ones.
I guess the easiest way to, answer that is you get what you put into it. So you get a soulless plant if you just throw chemical fertilizers at it. And if you put the intention behind by, like you said, with Aloha Organics, we do ferments, which is, it's pretty basic knowledge. It's pretty easy. It's plants, fruits and vegetables, sugar. We ferment it, and that's what we feed our plants. So getting everybody back on the aina and getting their hands in the dirt and getting everybody back and involved in the plant, in the medicine, and just being involved, period, and being in the moment, period. Whether it be in the moment and being in the garden or being in the moment at the stoplight, I think that's just being aware of those and being present in the moment is where we can start. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
So aloha and thank you guys for doing this. I'm really here to answer the last, other than Randy's question. I was involved as a freshman during what we call the conference committee where we enacted the medical marijuana dispensary, which meant, you folks don't know this because I don't see any of the advocates in that room at 9 o'clock at night where 4 hours earlier, the whole medical marijuana dispensary law collapsed. Okay, and we resurrected it by basically changing the Senate leadership, putting new conferences on there, and we resurrected it. So when somebody says that we don't talk to people, we do. I mean, like I'm here listening to you folks, and before that dispensary law came about, I don't know if you, I don't think this was before Randy was involved in the legislature. Della Bellotti, Willis Sparrow, former Senator Willis Sparrow, Representative Bellotti, went island to island and actually had these kind of discussions to see what was out there. And we had experts from California, Colorado at that time, saying what it was that was working there. And yeah, what we came up with was something of a mishmash and highly regulated, because like I tell Roger Christie every time he tells me, why can't you just legalize it? Well, one, Randy knows this, I gotta get the majority of the senators. We passed in the Senate this time. Now we gotta get a majority of the House. House killed it. When I was in the House, we passed it in the House, it died in the Senate. So we gotta have the majority of both chambers. And it has to pass the governor. My civil asset forfeiture bill, which required a conviction, I got it passed on both chambers and the governor kills it with a veto. So you need this. I'm glad you put this together because now you got the emails and everybody here. Because as you know, Jaclyn, Roger, Brent, whenever a marijuana bill comes out, I'm on the line to you folks to try to get you guys to testify, and I get 5. There's more than 5 here. How come I can't get you guys to testify? And I do know, and I'm glad NORML is here to tell you guys how easy it is to testify, and maybe you guys need to get a tree chain out because you have 48 hours to get the testimony in. But if I only get 5, and Attorney General HPD, they get all the police officers testifying against, what do you think the odds are of me passing your clones bill, or your inter-island bill, or your legal cannabis bill? it's, I'm talking to the choir and I'm preaching to the choir and I love you folks, but you guys gotta help me out. Not just vote me in, which I thank you guys for doing that, but I'm only one. And I need you folks to help me when I get there to talk the other people into it. And I know Randy's there all the time, but he's only one. You know, and Jaclyn is only one, and Brent and Roger. I need you folks to come in and testify. That's the only thing I want to tell you. We'll do our best to get people, but you guys need to testify. And I thank you, Jaclyn, for saying that even if you don't like the entire bill, because like the Health Committee in the Senate passed a really potentially bad bill which cut the cultivation licenses down, and I think we fixed it a little bit, but it's still there. You know, it increases dispensary license, but my bill to try to do a horizontal to get cultivation licenses out, that died. So I'm doing my best, but you guys need to help me out. Yeah, thank you.
No, Joy, please, thank you so much. I have a question for you, actually. Joy, may I bother you to please just highlight for the audience maybe where we are with some of these bills? I think you put through SB 241, which was the inner island transport for personal consumption for patients. And then we also had SB 767, which was the legalization bill that did pass the Senate. Can I bother you for a moment to just give everybody in the audience who may not be aware? Can you give us some legislative updates, if you don't mind?
Okay, so that passed the Senate, and last year, or I think 2 years ago, that same bill on inter-island passed both House and Senate. I was able to talk the majority into it, but guess who vetoed it? You know, I think I hold the record in the legislature of having the most vetoed bills, you know, because, but so I'm really doing my best. So that one will probably die in the House.
Okay.
So is the legal cannabis bills, because we already had Speaker testify, say to Sybil Beat that he's going to kill it, right, or something. So, and I'm no longer in the House, and we lost Senator Ruderman in the Senate.
Yeah.
So we need both, we need champions on both sides.
Excellent. I have one other question for you, Senator. So SB 767, it sounds like it's died, and that was a piece of legalization bill this session. Given that next year is an election year, what are your thoughts on the next or the soonest a piece of cannabis legislation that advocates for legalization adult use? What can we expect as far as a timeline that's based on everything that you know?
I think 2022 session,
okay.
Right? But really, the reality is because 2022 is an election year, I don't expect anything to pass that year. If you notice the dispensary bill that finally passed, that passed on an odd numbered year,
okay.
Not on an election year. Okay, all the controversy, it's not controversial to us, okay, but it's controversial in Oahu. All the controversial bills are usually passed, if at all, on odd number years. Like people have quoted, the Tribune Herald yesterday has me talking about abortion. So it's an odd numbered year. So hopefully we pass that this year.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Joy.
Okay,
Thank you. Aloha.
I said one more thing. I just wanted to be respectful and let everybody else speak, but I have something that's a completely different subject that I think is super relevant. Cannabis in Hawaii. How do we bring indigenous Hawaiian cannabis growers to the table? Lots of other states, Nevada is one that specifically has a ton of indigenous cultures that are getting involved in the cannabis industry that are doing very well. How do we allow that to perpetuate in Hawaii, not let the indigenous Hawaiian farmers get left behind, and bring them to the table? Do they need a voice? Do they need organization? Do they, what is it and how do we bring them to the table to make sure that it's viable? I would love for my sons to be fourth generation Hawaiian cannabis farmers. So how do I make that happen? And what infrastructure is needed to be put in place to allow that to organically happen and for Hawaiian farmers, Hawaiian cannabis farmers, to not be left behind?
That's a great question. Who would like to field that question?
Well, I think personally, it's a lot of the things that we spoke about here is the lowering that barrier to entry and having a fair opportunity to actually be successful by having a very open and less regulated market. So I think that definitely, like you said, organizing, of course, for sure. The more people, the more coordinated your voice. The definitely probably get an organization and define your needs and goals, and then a system where the barriers to entry are lowered. So I think getting that legacy farmer in is going to be the difficult part, because just lowering the barrier still is a business, and there's still a lot of things that those farmers are still going to have to also learn that are going to be different than the old ways, to actually run a successful business. So I think, that conglomeration of things right there will help.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you just said there, about low barrier to entry, more attainable licenses, lower fees for licenses, that kind of stuff would all help with being more attainable. But, I really think, obviously indigenous people all over the world, and particularly in the United States, have just been mistreated so much over the years. I think we should really talk about, when this goes forward, having a fund available, because money is the biggest barrier to getting in, and having a fund available, from the state where indigenous farmers can have an opportunity to either get interest-free loans or just straight-up grants to be able to get in. I think it would only be fair. It would be right. It would be justice.
Yeah, so I actually have a follow-up question. So, we're talking about lowering the barrier to entry, and it seems to be around the financial entry point to attain one of the permits or licenses. I think when we're also talking about exporting, right, having, Hawaii cannabis brand out there, does it mean grown in the soil? Does it mean just grown under the Hawaiian sun? How does testing standards come into this, and how do you lower the barrier of entry when we're still contending with testing standards, and does that elevate the Hawaii cannabis brand because there's a way of quantifying it being synonymous with quality? I know that's loaded. Anyone want to take that?
Well, I do know that, for instance, in Washington State, when we first launched, there was not a lot of history out there on, what types of things are bad in cannabis, and what does it do to people. There's not a lot of research and knowledge on the types of microbials and things that they were testing for, and they had such a high threshold for cannabis that was well beyond any other industry, food or anything, that there was some failing. You had a lot of people failing, their whole batches would fail because they had these totally unrealistic thresholds. And so I think, first of all, I think there needs to be a whole lot more research on what is bad. Sure, mold is bad and you don't want to smoke it, microbials, etc. But how much, they're not even sure if maybe putting a flame to it actually, kills that. So there's just not even any real research. I think they tried to cookie cutter the agricultural industry right onto cannabis without a whole lot of research on exactly what are the things we really should be concerned about, because there's not a lot of track record of people really getting damaged from smoking bad cannabis. So I think there was definitely a knee-jerk reaction that we have to have these high testing standards, when in reality it's probably still pretty safe under almost all circumstances. So I think that's the biggest thing, is we just really need to know for sure before they start putting all these barriers on it.
Thank you for that response. May, I'm going to ask you for a follow-up. I mean, as a healthcare provider and a nurse for so many years, I'd love for you to kind of chime in on the importance of it and what you're seeing with your patients now.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to testing, we should focus on what we actually know is dangerous. So that's, Aspergillus, E. coli, Salmonella, across the board. That's super important, especially with immunocompromised patients. The only inhaled cannabis-related death we've seen have been from Aspergillus. So I think Aspergillus is really, number one when it comes to testing. I also think cannabinoids and potency are really important, just so people can focus on getting proper dosing, right? Because that's the only other thing that's dangerous about cannabis is improper dosing. When somebody unintentionally takes too much THC, especially if they're elderly. So really instead of, I think that the testing standards here are way too much. And I think it should be just focused on really what we know is dangerous. And that's Aspergillus and cannabinoids and potency. I think those are the most important things for people to know. And, I would like to see terpenes, but that's, again, idealist.
Next question, is that Gail?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Aloha, everyone. This has been a great discussion. And just to follow up on this last discussion with regard to testing, and I'm no expert in it, obviously, but, one of the things we see in the food side of things is some of the most recent research out there. Maybe you guys saw it. I think it was a 2019 study on when we compared conventional farming versus organic or regenerative farming of apples. And we saw a big difference in the microbiome colonization within the fruit in terms of where it was and the type of microbiome. When you tend towards conventional farming and away from organic and regenerative, you shift the microbiome by about 40% towards pathogenic microbes. So as we begin to look at testing and molding this industry here in Hawaii, I think best management practices with regard to agriculture, and I think Cab Baber, who I'm a big fan of, spoke to it a little bit eloquently earlier. Let's focus on regenerative. It's big agricultural tent, but maybe we don't have time to waste on certain practices anymore. So that's on the agricultural side of things. I do have a question, but a couple of comments too. We have a hemp farm, and so more of my background in terms of regulation is on the low THC side of things. And boy, have we been frustrated the last few years in the legislature too. But just like you folks were saying, Jackie, and some other people, so much of it is about relationships and taking the time to get to know them. But the hard part is you're out in the field farming, or you're working a job, and you're not a paid lobbyist. And so that's where I think it gets very difficult. Besides just getting over the mental hurdle, maybe that these folks are approachable, but certainly when you make the time, they typically are. I know CAB helped coordinate the effort in getting the hemp legislation passed. It took several years, 2013 to 2015, but one of the things they did, and it was exactly what you guys are doing here right now, is they did talk story with the legislature at the beginning of the session and had key experts in and invited the public safety people, and that sure seemed to move the dial super quickly. So I don't know if this industry's been doing this a high THC at the beginning of each session, but at the Capitol, or I guess now in the world we live in this, maybe Zoom land or something like that. I'm really glad that you brought up the equity piece. I mean, it's huge, obviously, everywhere, and certainly it's social economic equity that we're looking for. And if that's the case, I kind of have now here's my question after all these comments. So I've been talking to different hemp coordinators around the country, and some of them in the states, and some of them are also the cannabis coordinators. The rational states, I guess here's another comment, they kind of they have their high THC and hemp people talking to one another. Oftentimes it's under the Department of Agriculture, not the Department of Health, because we're talking about a plant, and so you tend to get more rational legislation that way. But there's really great interagency coordination, and I don't think we've quite seen that yet here, it seems like. Certainly not on the hemp side. But in terms of the question I have, and then also speaking to the social and economic justice part, and echoing what some people have said with regard to the lower barriers of entry, where we've seen the most money revolving back around in the states where they've had adult use legalized, it's where they had the lowest fees. You know, we're talking $4,000 for high entry, $2,000 in some states. I think the bill I saw floating around here this year was SB 767, and it was $5,000 or higher, whatever the department deems is necessary. And I would say if we're going to lead, not follow, which I think is what some of the folks, maybe it was Cab was saying, then I think we need to lead with suggested fees and tiers. And the other aspect to that, if you want to grow a quality industry, one of the things we were trying to do on the hemp side that got thrown out the door last year, so we could incorporate our food security into this, more of the Lama Aina, was not only the residency requirement, but initial limitation on acreage. In Oregon, you can't grow more than an acre outdoor. And there's a reason for that. A lot more people are growing. It makes it a lot harder to take over a state with a large corporation if you have thousands and thousands of small farmers growing than if you've issued a handful of permits for very large acreage. So that doesn't eliminate anyone from farming. It just means more people can when we keep those low. So I guess my question would be, if we're talking about dollars, and I know some of you folks have looked at this in the panel, what are we looking at in terms of costs for entry and licensing? I think in terms of social equity, some of it should be free, like you said, and even subsidized. But that's not going to be the case for everyone. But to me, 5,000 was too high. But what do you guys think in terms of initial entry?
Yeah, I don't know what the actual number is for the license fee, but I would just say that the cost of the license fee is a fraction of the cost of setting up the business. And that, yes, the barrier to entry should be low, but it's not just the license fee that is the barrier to entry. It's the cost of setting up a business that's going to be able to, you know, deal with the regulations that are going to come with legalization. They're going to be able to deal with the testing and those things, and that costs money. And that's, you know, like I said, one of the things for social equity and social economic equity for you know, indigenous Hawaiians, like I said, the possibility of a state fund, so that for those people who don't have the funding but have maybe the land or have the skills can apply for it and get a grant to get it going. I think that would be a great program.
And I think if we break it up, the industry's broken up into cultivation, processing, and retail, then there can be different fee levels. But you aren't necessarily going to have all that expense if you're just a farmer necessarily, versus what the dispensaries had to go through, which was very onerous.
True, but there still is significant expense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did want to follow up to that. Joy actually introduced a bill. It was SB 1372, which actually allowed for additional cultivation licenses within this medical model. And I believe the capital requirement in that bill was lowered from 500,000 to 250,000. And typically what you have to show is that you can demonstrate that you can get the business off the ground, right? And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm just going based on what we've seen, and that was a bill that I think was heard in a couple of different hearings or committees on the Senate side. I don't think that it crossed over, but that was the bones of that bill this year. That was a capital requirement, if I'm not mistaken. The other thing I want to say, since you're standing there, Gail, is if you're there, I think it's absolutely absurd that the dispensaries cannot purchase hemp and CBD products from the Hawaii hemp farmers. It is just insanity, and please fix this, please.
Yeah, I was going to comment
crazy.
the same on that it seems that the medical dispensaries are the natural partners for Hawaii's CBD hemp industry, that, you know, the dispensaries have the trained staff that you know, can help patients select, that we have the locations for patients to come to, we can't sell your product. It doesn't make any sense.
Utilize it in our formulations.
Yeah, we
just
can use
utilize
it
it
in
in
our
the formulations. I
formulations.
mean, just to buy bulk product, to be
Right.
honest with you, as to enable us to have a flourishing pipeline of products available. I think, Dylan, if you want to chime in about, this is where we're talking about gaining economy of scale, right? And so we do have folks that are interested in CBD products, but it may be only 10 patients that come in the dispensary for CBD, and allocating the space, in the flowering room for just CBD strains, I would just rather be able to purchase, that bulk from you directly. Okay, there you go, sir.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that we can't buy, Hawaiian hemp-grown product and use it for what we're doing. It would extremely help our operations to be able to do that. Like Jaclyn was saying, it'll help the patients. It gets the cost down. It gets the more diversity of product. We can start to use other cannabinoids, CBN, CBG, Delta 8, things that that would really improve our diverse selection of products, and then it would also kind of start to get this program more on a wholesale, inter-license kind of model, which is essential to any good medical market or any recreational market in the country. We might be the only one. Maybe New York might be the only one, but I mean, New York's not a successful cannabis state by any means. But I think we're one of the only ones in the entire country that we can't sell between licenses, and it really creates a situation where you have jack of all trades. We can't. No one license can specialize on BHO concentrates or solventless concentrates or whatever, tinctures, transdermal patches. So we have to essentially be a jack of all trades, have smaller equipment, and it just doesn't make any sense. So.
I agree. Jackie, you said that, I'll go back. What was the build number that was dead, but it was $250,000 to get into cultivation?
I believe it was SB 1372. I think Joy would speak up if I was misspeaking. But it's SB 1372.
Certainly appreciate that, but that's still incredibly high for any farmer.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Makes sense.
I just wanted to add to what Casey was saying about the costs. Licensing fee is a very, very small fraction of what it costs to run the license the way it's set up right now. I think the size is really where you're going to prevent the MSOs. It's not going to make sense. If we're talking outdoor, an acre or whatever it is, or plant. If it doesn't make sense for the MSOs to come in because of the size of the cultivation or manufacturing, then they won't come in because they're way too busy doing what they're doing. And the size will also dictate the actual cost. But totally agree on the licensing cost. I mean, we should have a fund, like we've been talking about.
Hello, Megan. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, and I'll keep this quick. Thank you so much for even the meme Pakalolo for the people, because I feel like that can go out and do a lot of good work. And obviously, just even being limited how many people can be in the palace, we have to be thinking about who's not here right now. And my question is to anyone here who wants to throw in on this. The big missing piece seems to be connecting what we're talking about here with what is absolutely vital to us going forward, and that's economic recovery. There is a lot of pain because we've really seen some devastating economic effects. So it seems so obvious that these two things would be connected, but we just watched an election cycle go through where the dots didn't connect. And I'm thinking about creative media, and I'm thinking about how much I'd like to see when I'm going around the island. I'd like to see posters, I'd like to see bumper stickers, I'd like to see all the dots connecting. So if anyone has any comments to make about how to be connecting the cannabis and hemp industry here on this island with our economic recovery and then statewide, please go ahead and share. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. That's excellent.
I mean, this is right here tonight, I think that was our intention, is to start connecting the dots with Pakalolo for the people. We felt that there was a lot of no one had a unified voice. So I think the more that we can get the word out about this organization, we'd like to kind of see this thing take a life of its own. We don't really want this to be a Big Island grown thing by any means. That was not our intention. We just want to start to get a place where we can put, all the voices together to start unifying for change and really spreading the word on recovery.
No, it's true. And then be able to, develop this voting block. So I think that's about connecting the dots, right? I do think that this is one of hopefully many discussions that we have. And I just have to say, I think this has been incredibly thoughtful and respectful and such good energy. So thank you guys so much for putting out that love. I think, the mixed bag, I think also is not knowing where people stand, because it's such an emotional thing for so many folks. I think we still have to be more thoughtful, Megan, on how to connect those dots. I don't know that anyone has that answer right now, but I definitely think that you're 100% hitting the mark on what we need to do to be effective. And so, yeah. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I want to thank Megan for being my colleague, our colleague, with Solution120.com. Thank you, Megan. You're the epic spark plug for that good project. And if people will take a look at the website, there are 2 short videos on there that are, I think, required viewing to jumpstart our future here. One is called Hemp for Victory, and it's a U.S. government 14-minute film produced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1942 during the emergency that our grandparents were facing, and the government created the Hemp for Victory program, and they made this movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, it's going to blow your mind. It's really positive, very folksy. I mean, it's anchors away, my boys. Come on, it's USA all the way, how to help win World War II and get through their emergency. And the other movie that's on there, thanks to MedMen, is called The New Normal. And it's 3-minute video. It's fantastic. And it's from old days up until the here and now. So thank you, Megan, for helping make that happen. If people will watch that, I think they'll get stimulated and inspired.
Excellent.
What you said, you made some really good points. And the first thing is, again, we all just have to be engaged. As our state senator here was saying, 5 people submit testimony when she asks for testimony. Submit testimony. Make your voice heard. That's going to be one way we get it done. We thought that with this incredible need for economic recovery, that this might be the year that it actually happened. I think going into this session, we were really hopeful, but it got killed pretty quickly in the House. Be engaged, try to see what your representatives believe in, and vote for representatives that believe in what you believe in. If we have people that don't want progress, vote them out.
Yeah, and sign up for the mailing list on the website, pakaloloforthepeople.com. And I think that we're going to start to develop that website to create a communication channel, either via forum or different, list of events. And as we start to get closer for the next session, we can have more events, maybe to try and work with senators such as Joy to suggest some legislation that we might be able to introduce. And then from there, as a collective within the website and having these different events, we can stay super engaged as the bills are moving through the House and the Senate, and we can all basically submit testimony in real time when it matters. There's not 5, and we can really get behind that bill and get all of our voices heard. I think that's the point of what we're doing right here, and I hope that's what happens from tonight. So thank you, guys. And also that it becomes an endorsement that candidates are looking for, like some candidates seek like a union endorsement. I hope that we can actually become so powerful in what we're doing that it's an endorsement that candidates are seeking when they're running for office.
Great. Hi, my name is Nomi. I think various iterations of this question have been raised, but I'm just curious if you all support expungement along with adult legalization, and if you're in support of models like Chicago that prioritize the victims of the war on drugs for licenses, particularly people of color, I know obviously Indigenous people and Hawaiians here, but really, what kind of protections and limitations do you support to put in place to ensure that the profits of this industry are not largely enjoyed by white men like the rest of the country where legislation has moved through?
Excellent question. So, go ahead, Casey.
You know, a lot of states are starting to pass cannabis laws that have a social justice where they're, trying to, connect licenses to people that were damaged by the war on drugs. The problem that has happened with those is that often people who have been damaged by the war on drugs are not going to have the funding or the ability to get funding on their own, and then they end up getting taken advantage by larger, groups that use them as their prop to get the license. And so that's why, again, something like a state fund that's available for Indigenous Hawaiians or for also perhaps people that have been wronged by the war on drugs to make monies available so that they don't have to, raise money in the private funding area where they have the potential to be taken advantage of. I think, some sort of, I don't want to, you've heard the buzzword in politics a lot about reparations, but, something needs to be done to give the Indigenous Hawaiians a chance to get into this industry. And first, sure, yes. And just first and with and all, like not necessarily first. I think someone pointed out how, not just first, but just getting in first doesn't mean you're going to be successful, and because you didn't get in first doesn't mean you're going to fail. A lot of companies that have gotten into it after learned from the mistakes of those companies that did get in first and failed. But just something to give them the resources to be able to get in I think that would be a huge part of this program.
I appreciate that, and I'd love to see some enforcement. I know in Chicago they've passed equitable legislation, but it's still like, a year and a half later and no black or brown people have licenses yet. So I would like to see some enforcement in that, and I appreciate you taking my question.
Thank you so much for that question.
Okay. I have a question over here. I'm doing the sound, but anyway, it's not so much a question as a follow-up to, I believe Monica touched on this. And I feel that we can't really be free totally like the liquor industry. The liquor industry, if you were to take it to the Supreme Court, no problem. Ours could not even make the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court just says equal under law. Well, we're a Schedule I federal narcotic. We're in the same category as cocaine, as meth, as heroin, which is totally absurd. But so long as the feds still have that, excuse my language, that trump card, it can be used to always throw a monkey wrench. There's an amendment in the Constitution that repealed prohibition. So it is in writing, and that, is law. I feel that somehow we got to put pressure on our senators in Washington, and it's about time to take this crazy idea that compares marijuana to methamphetamines, to heroin, to all that other crazy stuff. And if we don't do that, you can have a real conservative based administration where the Attorney General says, hey, I'm going to just say this is federal law, which supersedes the states and starts making it hard for us to accomplish what we want. I believe in grassroots. Yes, we got to start at the grassroots and educate the people and have the people's voices heard. But if we don't get this stupid Schedule I, which is absurd, we got to push on that as well. So it's actually working, yes, from the bottom up, but also from the top down, just by bugging our senators and our congressmen and saying, hey, this is totally ludicrous. And anyway, I know that you touched a little bit about it, Monica. That's just my feelings, how I feel that, that scares me.
I agree. Yeah, it's a big one because it puts the wrench, like you said, in everything. It can be the excuse towards throwing away any bill. So again, I think that Hawaii has a chance to be the group of people to say, get it off and deschedule and make it so being community, coming together, still having these conversations, great conversations. I mean, like I said, everybody's so passionate about everything that they do, but in the end, we still have that bump and we need to get rid of it because it is being used against us in many ways. The rules and regulations, compliance, the stuff that is put up against cannabis industry is ridiculous and needs to go because there's the rules. I mean, there's dust on the table. It's ridiculous. I mean, scales had to be checked, floors scrubbed. I mean, where do you? I'm sorry, but things that you buy at Walmart are not being that carefully compliant. It's not happening. And cannabis is always scrutinized.
So this is actually where I'd like to acknowledge that there is someone who has been working on this for years. Dr. Otto has really been elevating the discussion about how state law reconciles with federal law. I think this year he started to really gain traction. Some of what he said has moved towards a resolution. If I'm not mistaken, it's scheduled for a couple of hearings. I do think it's the first step. My understanding of resolutions is that they're not necessarily legally binding, but I do think that in that respect, this session, that discussion has been elevated more than any other previous sessions. And the fact that Hawaii State has carved out and said that there is a medical use for cannabis, there is a way, it appears, to be able to reconcile that against federal law and say, you know, we've carved it out as a state. And so I think, I can't speak more to it other than that, but I do know that he's really pushing that discussion and wanted to acknowledge his efforts. Thank you. Okay, do we have any more questions in the audience? Okay, I want to say thank you guys so much for coming. I want to thank Brent here, who's been very silent here in the corner and has been documenting everything we're saying, taking notes, facilitating the entire process from Hawaii Cannabis Union. Thank you so much. So Brent is fantastic. Thank you guys so much for such a wonderful discussion. Open hearts, been very honest, and I just love that it really feels like there's a sense of unity already. And thank you folks again for coming out. This will be one of many, so dial in for more to come. Thank you so much.